I'm Dr. Kathy Maupin, and this is episode 51 of the BioBalance Healthcast.
And I'm Brett Newcomb. And today we're talking about a subject that we've been talking about together for quite a while. We've been doing 51 podcasts now on hormone replacement therapy, and one of our emphasis is the hormone testosterone. And we have been writing a book about testosterone for women because it gets downplayed in the public media and in the medical media that testosterone is a critical ingredient for women. And when you talk about replacing testosterone in women, what we have discovered is that a question that continually arises is the question of FDA regulation and legality. People don't know about that, and they keep asking us about that. So we thought today we would talk about the distinctions that are made with regard to FDA and legal supervision, regulation, licensing, whatever the terminology needs to be, about testosterone.
And the FDA is Federal Drug Administration, and they're paid by the United States, of course, to keep us safe. They keep our drugs safe, our food safe, also over-the-counter drugs. So that's very important to know. That's your tax dollars keeping you safe. And they're very spread out. However, they have committees who research drugs, and they look for their effectiveness. They monitor how carefully they're produced, and to make sure that they're sterile, and to make sure that they do the things that they say they do. So all of those things are regulated by the FDA.
So when the Food and Drug Administration regulates a drug, what does that mean exactly?
That means that the drug is found to be safe, effective, not dangerous, or dangerous with in certain parameters. In other words, all of the side effects are listed.
So they monitor the production and distribution,
right,
so that content control and quality control are standardized. And that way anybody anywhere in the United States, or anybody that buys a drug that's made and released in the United States, is confident in the standardization of the quality. But is that all that they do, is just monitor quality of production and distribution? When you say they regulate it, can anybody go, like you go to the store in St. Louis County where we live in Missouri, and they regulate access to things like Sudafed. So somebody controls who can generate it, whether or not it has to be prescription.
They decide whether it becomes prescription or not.
Those distinctions.
And they decide whether the public's aware of the drug, like Tylenol. You know, that something like that can be over the counter and is safe enough, and the milligrams are actually appropriate for over the counter. In other words, they're usually half the dose of what a prescription medication would be.
So the things that a private citizen could decide for themselves, oh, I think I need this medicine, and go and get an over-the-counter medicine. Over-the-counter means I can make that decision unilaterally. I don't need to see a physician. I don't need a prescription. But to sort of protect me from myself, they regulate the content dosage of the active ingredients in the over-the-counter meds.
Right, and they tell us that it needs to be filled by a pharmacist. And it can also be filled, in some cases, like injections and pellets, can be filled through a physician. So they regulate that process.
They being the FDA.
The FDA makes a decision: is this over the counter? Is it safe enough? Is this to be distributed by pharmacists? Is it to be distributed by doctors? All of those things are the legalities of how we get our drugs.
And so then is all of that published in a location like the PDF, the physician desk
PDR.
reference?
The PDR has all of the drugs written, every side effect, every action, what the chemical structure is. Everything that you wanted to know is in the PDR, but it almost takes an MD or a pharmacy
to read and understand it.
Or a pharmacy degree to actually read it and understand it, maybe a chemistry degree. So some of these things are so complicated, it's very hard to tell what they really are for. But most physicians know that, because that's part of what we're trained. We're trained to know what a particular drug family and a particular drug does, what the side effects are, who can take it, who can't take it. All those things are in our memory.
So when you talk about regulation then of a drug and licensing of a drug, it's my understanding is, as a layman, that they identify a usage and they say this is the primary usage that you would have for this particular drug. So like, here's a drug that's used for cancer, or here's a drug that's used for depression. But I understand that sometimes doctors use those drugs that are primarily designated as being understood to be used for this illness for other things, that there are off-label uses.
Let's talk about drugs that are approved for certain reasons. So first, the FDA says this drug is actually effective, that it actually does what it's supposed to do, and it's not too dangerous for us to take. So that's the regulated part, and it should be administered by a pharmacist or doctor.
Okay.
The next step is they have to go through a huge process as to whether it's effective for a certain illness. So that's the approved part. They approve it for arthritis. They approve it for seizures. They approve it for migraines.
And how do they come to that approval?
They take, the drug is usually championed by a pharmaceutical company. And the pharmaceutical company has put lots of money into R&D, which is research and development. They're the people that invest in this.
They want to patent their particular, or copyright their particular
they've already done it.
Ingredient combinations of these drugs.
Right, so they can own it. Then they've invested all this money. Then they go to the FDA with their studies that they've paid for to prove that it works for a certain disease.
Okay.
Then the FDA looks at it and looks at the studies to see if they're really done appropriately, if enough people are helped by it, and then they say, yes, this is approved for a particular disease.
Okay, so if you see on television a company that says, we do medical studies, and if you want to pick up some chump change, come and apply for our company, and maybe we'll take a weekend and dose you with a lot of interesting things, most of which will be placebos. What's going on there is that some pharmaceutical group is trying to do the background work to make an application for approval to the FDA.
They have to be, they're regulated too. They have to get their trial approved to make sure it's safe for the people in the trial. So they have to go through an approval process just to do the trial.
Okay.
Then when the trial's done, then the FDA looks at all of their studies and decides.
The research, the data collection, the parameters for all of that are predefined in the application for the trial.
Right. They
and
are.
then when they reach their conclusions and they turn that information into the FDA, then they go back and check that all that is accurate.
That's
which
true.
is why it takes so much money and so long a period of time to get something to be approved in the United States.
That's why drugs cost so much, because the approval process is so intricate and they're so careful that it takes years and years to come up with a particular drug. And then what happens is the pharmaceutical company comes to the FDA with a patented drug, and then there's maybe only 5 years left on the patent. So they've got to make their money in 5 years.
Okay.
So they have to charge.
Which is why the named drugs are higher priced than the generic drugs. And why when you fill out a prescription form, you mark whether or not a generic can be substituted for the name drug.
Yeah, and the name drug's called a brand. So when your doctor signs on the right-hand side of a prescription, that means he only believes that the brand will work for you. Or maybe there's not a generic yet. And if he or she signs on the left-hand side, that means that the pharmacist can substitute the generic for the brand. And that's fine as well. All of those things are ways to save money, but the generic doesn't come out until the patent's run.
Right.
And the drug company that did all the work has to earn its money during the time the patent runs. And sometimes they're 5 years, and sometimes they're 10 years. Sometimes they're 3 years by the time they get to the public.
So they have to front load their cost recovery, which is why brand name drugs are as expensive.
I'm not justifying the
you're just
cost
explaining
of drugs.
the process.
I'm trying to explain why a little pill that probably costs 5 cents to make isn't just 5 cents.
Right.
Why it might be $2 a pill because of all of the our research and development it took to actually get there.
Right. Not to mention production and distribution cost and
marketing.
And
marketing to patients. That happened several years ago. They used to not do that. We used to have drug reps always come in and market new products, and now it's marketed to the patient. Patients come in and say, I want Boniva. Sally Fields uses it. I want it.
Yeah, well, I don't know what it is or what it's for, but boy, she looks good, and so I need to have that.
Yeah, so marketing has started to, and that's very expensive, television marketing, so that adds to the cost. One of the things that I think is funny, Viagra just went generic Viagra used to be $20 a pill. Viagra is now like $3 a pill.
Because
So-
they've recapitalized their investment.
Right.
And
now
the
a
patent has run out.
any company can make it.
Okay.
So it's generic Viagra. So then any company, any pharmaceutical company that makes generics can do that. So having said all of this, okay,
I was going to
we
say I'm
now
up
know
for that,
what
but I guess I shouldn't say that.
we now know. I'm going to ignore that. we now know that that we have regulations by the FDA. Then they have to approve a drug for a certain diagnosis. However, those drugs are often used off-label, meaning a doctor knows that that drug went through a process that proved that it worked for one use, but they know because of their pharmaceutical training, by reading everything they can about the drug, that it can be used for a different use as well, that it wasn't approved for. Maybe the pharmaceutical company didn't want to spend more money on another approval process.
Right.
Maybe they didn't think they'd make money off of it. It was only for a very small number of people who, like an orphan disease, a very small group of
I remember years ago there was a
patients.
drug called interferon that was so expensive because there was such a small segment of the population that would benefit from it. But for those people, it was literally a
It
life-saving
is.
drug.
It is.
And so then you have the question of one administration of that drug could cost multiple thousands of dollars because there's not the volume to justify mass production, so they don't research and get approval on these secondary or tertiary applications that doctors may figure out, and in their experience with the patients about whom they have knowledge and with whom they have relationships, and they say, all right, because of your health history, I want to try this medicine for you. So the professional clinical judgment of the physician comes into play when you talk about off-label application of a regulated or approved drug.
Right, right. And actually, it's a regulated and approved drug because they're approved for one use. We're now talking about, let's say, interferon. You brought that up.
Yeah.
Interferon is now used in a cream form. So I had a drug rep come to me and say, here's some Aldera. It's a cream. We use it for vaginal warts. Okay, not a pretty subject, but that's what gynecologists use it for. So I look at the label. It's interferon.
Wow.
That's what's in it.
Yeah.
And so I know that interferon can be applied to brown spots or precancerous skin lesions because it's precancerous. So interferon is going to decrease its ability to multiply and it should go away. So I was using it off-label for people who had potentially abnormal brown spots.
So not for the vaginal warts, which
Well,
is
I
what
was
they...
using it for that as well.
Yes, but you also knew because of what it did and how it worked and what its ingredients were,
Right.
that it could be applied to discolored skin that might be precancerous.
That's right. And not all doctors are really good at pharmacology, but we're trained in it. That's what we do. In medical school, we spend a whole year on pharmacology.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't sound like much, but in medical school
pretty
it is.
intense.
And
Yeah.
so we understand the different types or families of drugs and how they're used. So having said that, when you use a drug off-label, it's very common, but many doctors say, I never use a drug off-label. I think that's terrible to use a drug off-label. Well, if that were the case with every physician, we'd never find the new uses for drugs because you can go back to the FDA and have it reapproved for the new reason or the new diagnosis.
Without doing all the research all over
You
again?
have to do some of it, but you don't have to do as much. And
Okay.
it usually is reapproved oftentimes by, if it's gone to generic, it's not going to be reapproved. But if it's still under patent, they'll reapprove it for another use.
Okay, so we're talking about three concepts involving understanding the framework through the FDA about a drug. One concept is if the drug is regulated. Another is if it's approved for use for a particular diagnosis or illness. And the third is off-label applications that can be, the use of which can be determined by physicians.
That's right. That's
and
right.
all of that is legal. All of that
All
is
of that is
acceptable
legal.
to
In
the
fact,
FDA.
all the drugs we've been talking about are legal. There's a whole other area of drug use that's monitored by the DEA and only by the FDA when they're looking for doctors who are prescribing misprescribing controlled substances.
Well, and we're going to
Those
talk
are
about
addictive
that
drugs.
in our next podcast as we continue this conversation, because there's so much information here that has to be brought into focus for people to truly understand, so that they can make good consumer decisions, and or so that they can talk to their physicians about what's most appropriate for their unique circumstance. But we're not talking about mass-produced medicines, even though we're talking about mass-produced medicines distinction. So it requires the knowledge, the expertise, and the risk-taking
if you're going
capacity
to
of
write
your
off
physician.
label.
Yes, if you're going
Because
to write.
non-risk takers will never write off label, even if they know there's no other drug to cure you, but they know there is this drug, but it's approved for a different reason.
Well, we'll talk about some specific examples of that in our next conversation, and one that I want you to be thinking about is the one that you told me about as a labor and delivery drug that was an off-label use.
Yes.
So we'll come back to
Okay.
that as we continue our discussion about the Food and Drug Administration and the regulatory/legality processes.
If you'd like to know more about bioidentical hormones or medical things, because we're not just talking about that, please go to my website at biobalancehealth.com or call our office at 314-993-0963.
You can also contact us through my blog, which is brettnewcomb.com.